Ivy, and I did my presentation on the person who I was with this semester, and his name was Andrew, and he was in the 5th grade, and I think it was neat because in the 5th grade they have different teachers for each class, one for math, one for science, and one for English and language arts. So I got to follow Andrew around and also see how he did in different subjects and with different teachers. He's 11 years old in the 5th grade, like I said. His family is not overly involved. For example, when I sent home the letter for participation for this class, his mom checked that it was okay, but she didn't sign it, so the teacher called and she was like, oh, I just didn't look at it, and she normally doesn't sign papers and send them back. He comes from a low-income family. Some days, or some weeks actually, he'll wear the same clothes all week. So at the school now, they have provided him clothes to wear at school that he can change into in the mornings, and our school also does a program where they send home backpacks on the weekends filled with food that they can take home with them, just to make sure they get something to eat on the weekends. He has ADD, and actually I never even realized this until towards the end of the semester when his mom sent a note up to the school and was like, I kind of feel like maybe we should take him off, and all the teachers were kind of agreeing with that he's always very timid. He doesn't say much. He never has had behavior problems, anything like that. I did notice, however, when he did come off of it, he was a lot more talkative. He got into trouble sometimes, and he would normally never be that way. Some of his strengths and interests, he is very hardworking and dedicated. I think he has completely changed what I thought about special education and how some of the students would be. He always wants to succeed. He will try and try again until he gets the right answer, and sometimes he just needs a little extra help. The best subject is in math. I really like watching him in math because he is such a hard worker. He always wants to make good grades, even in the subjects that he struggles in. He continuously just wants to make a good grade. If he does all of his homework, he feels like he really accomplished something, and he normally does. He's not one who misses homework all the time or anything like that. He's also very interested in science. In their science class, they do a lot of engaging young engineers and a lot of hands-on things. So he really likes that, and instead of just having to read something and take a test on it, he can actually manipulate objects, and he really likes that, and he seems to do well with that as well. Another one of Andrew's interests were sports. He said he didn't play them, but he did like to watch them and watch other people play them. And I do notice at recess and stuff, he plays kickball with everybody else, and that's just something that he has fun with. He started out in 2nd grade in special education, being tested for it, and then he did have an IEP. He struggles the most with reading. He has a hard time, especially with long passages, just staying on task or even getting through it and comprehending the meaning with that. I think it also depends on his reading environment. I think he does a lot better in the special education room. Sometimes in the classroom that he's in right now, the teacher doesn't like for someone to help them or assist them. She likes them to sit there and work independently. And sometimes he just needs a little motivation or a little help or a little coaching through it. So sometimes I think it's just his environment that kind of beats him up a little bit and makes him feel a little defeated when he's sitting there with no help or anything, no guidance or anything. So I think he kind of feels like he's failing at it. He also does go to speech twice a week because he does have trouble saying some sounds and things like that, but it has gotten tremendously better just throughout when I've seen him through this semester. And he has no behavior issues. He is always very sweet, quiet, follows directions. The only time that a few behavior issues did come up is right at the end of the semester when I was there and they had him taken off of his medication. I did notice he started to get in trouble more and act out a little more. Like I said earlier, he is very timid at times. But while I noticed that, I think it also depends on his settings where he is a lot more social. For example, in the resource room, at lunch, and PE, I noticed he can be loud and laugh, and he'll cut up and be silly with his friends, but he does know there's a time and place for that, and even in the resource room, when it's time to work, he stops and he goes to work. And that he was more social and more interactive without his medication. Also on his sociogram, some things I noticed about it that I have up here, he kind of had multiple lines to the same people, and the other friend that he chose too was his friend in special education. I did notice they interact a lot, and also a lot of the other boys in the class, he interacts with them a lot too. When I observed him in different settings, I observed him in the special education room, in the math classroom, and in the English classroom. I noticed he was the hardest working at math. I think I can tell he really likes it, and he likes to try to manipulate the numbers and try to get the correct answer. And I noticed in reading, while he did struggle with it, and sometimes the teacher might not have provided him with a lot of help, he did like to succeed. The day when I observed, he got everyone on his homework right, and he was so proud of himself for that, and that was in spelling. And he was, out of all of those, he was more outgoing in the resource room. That is a little more laid back, and they were allowed to play games and stuff like that, and I think it's just a small, more intimate setting, and that makes him come out of his shell a little more than when he's just by himself. Some effective interventions with him are small groups. He does a lot better working with just a few people. Fewer questions on a test. Some can be eliminated just to not be so overwhelming. Also, we would take some tests apart sometimes and give it like that just so he's not so overwhelmed. If he tests in quieter areas and quieter rooms, I noticed that, and I also noticed that especially in reading, he did a lot better in smaller, intimate settings, and I think it's too just because he's kind of nervous. I think he knows he struggles in reading, so he's kind of nervous to let a lot of people hear him, which in a small group it'll be 3 or 4 people at the maximum, and he feels a lot more comfortable with that. I got Andrew in a lot of cooperative learning groups. I did it in math, in science, and in reading as well. We would take tests in them. In reading, we would, read a story. We did one story on a lesson that I taught them, and it was about volcanoes, and it was nonfiction, so it was a little more difficult of a read. So we actually spent 2 days on it and just read it all the way through and broke it down into parts and answered questions that way, and he does better in a smaller setting with just a little bit of guidance. And also some of the words were difficult, so we would stop and talk about some of the words, so when he read it, he didn't have any clue or anything like that. So I thought that really helped with that. And also, I think he works even harder in a small group like that. Since the teacher, or me, I was right there, he wants to show you how good he is progressing and how good he can do on whatever the assignment or task is at the time. I have learned a lot. I have seen the benefits of special education, how if Andrew wasn't in special education, he might not be succeeding as well as he is right now. In math, he has an A, and he does struggle with it a little bit. He works so hard. It's great to see that with just a little help, and I'm glad I got to be part to help that some this semester, that he's doing wonderful. And I've seen how hardworking they all can be in the room. That is a time, it's a little more laid back, but they also work really hard. I've also noticed with social issues. Sometimes just going in the resource room a few times, it's a little more, it's not a full class where you can feel overwhelmed. It's just a little more, it's a smaller setting, a smaller group. You get to know that teacher on a one-to-one basis more, and you make friends in there, so it helps with social issues, and they can take that outside the classroom and become more confident. And some other things that I did learn, I did see a lack of time with the special education teacher just because she has some in her room full time. I saw him more with resource teachers and I'm sorry, with the aides, and sometimes I'm not sure how much that helped them, but with funding and stuff, that really can't be helped sometimes. And I did notice in certain classrooms he would be a little more confident with the teacher. In one classroom, the teacher really wasn't willing to help the children in special ed, and I could tell that really affected them. I feel like their spirits were a little bit beaten down in that class because they just kind of felt like they could never catch up with everybody else because they didn't just have that little bit of help that could have really just made them do great in that class. So that is all of my presentation.